All right, so explain the importance of the Navajo Code Talkers, right? Now the Pacific Theater. How did the Navajo Code Talkers help with the U.S. when it came to relaying messages across the Pacific Ocean? All right, so Pacific Ocean, huge body of water, biggest ocean in the world. So we need to make sure we can disguise our communications. What better way, right? There you go. Today we are going to talk a little bit more about the battles of Iwo Jima and Okinawa. And then we'll talk about Manhattan. Which tomorrow you have an assignment, Manhattan Project. It's going to be about the decisions that Harry Truman had to make. Came to ending the war out in the Pacific. Also, there's primary resources attached, which there's a few questions you have to answer based off of that. When you get into the class, you sit down in your seat, your side seat. Okay? Not sitting on any tables, not acting up. Okay, come in, sit right here. Yeah. And you get a seatbelt, put it on. Okay.
My keyboard is not a keyboard.
Now we look at this. It sounds like you have a problem.
A question mark becomes a dash. That'll fix it.
Well, what do you do to it? Were you throwing your iPad around?
Problem.
Okay.
Oh, I got it. Right here. All right, so Navajo Code Talkers. What was the importance of the Navajo Code Talkers? What do we got? Paul, go ahead.
Allowed the U.S. to communicate across the seas and the territories without the Japanese breaking the code.
Yeah, good job, right? So we need to get up in Japanese. We're going to intercept our transmissions, our communications at some point, right? And obviously it was happening ever since the beginning of the war. So we need to make sure we can disguise. So what better way than use a language that's been in America before the United States was even created? Something, a language that only a select few people know. And with that, we use our diversity in the United States here to our advantage. So we can communicate and relay these messages through this Navajo language all across the Pacific Ocean. Pacific Ocean's huge, right? And as we're island hopping our way back to mainland Japan, taking over many of these islands, like we mentioned yesterday, taking back the Philippines. Who was that who came back? The Terminator? Connor? Douglas MacArthur. Yeah, good job. So as we're advancing far out in Southeast Asia and Pacific, well, we need to make sure we can disguise our communication. So we use these Navajo code talkers to help when it came to relaying these messages. And with the Japanese, they just couldn't pick up on it. They couldn't decipher it. So it was a real form of intelligence here that's helping us when it came to our planning, our strategizing, and again, the Pacific Ocean's massive. So if anything, the Japanese were listening in on every step of the way, but they had no idea what our next plan of attack was. All right, is there any questions? Okay, so I do have a few terms for you today. Again, I'll talk about Iwo Jima and Okinawa as well. All right, so I didn't get to dive into that too much. But we are coming close to the end of the chapter, which is obviously the end of the year, which your test will be pretty much just on this here, World War II. So it's not gonna be like a final from the beginning of the year. That's a lot of information, I get it. Plus the test would be massive. So I just figured, well, we'll just focus on World War II, as this is shaping what's gonna be modern history, obviously, what we know today. And with the Cold War, we wrapped it in here and there. And we'll talk a little bit more about it next coming, obviously, next week, and the week after. But you can kind of see where we're going. All right. So Japanese internment camps. Yeah, I know I talked a little bit about this right after Pearl Harbor, and how the United States was trying their best when it came to preventing maybe an attack internally. And I know it sounds harsh. I know it sounds unbelievable, but that the United States would partake in this type of action against Japanese Americans, right? But we did. And looking back at it now is maybe not the right choice, but in a time of war, that was the best one we had, the best idea. So FDR created these internment camps way out in the middle of the desert, okay, to try to prevent any type of an attack internally. So the Japanese internment camps, those happening ever since the war started against Japan in 1941 after Pearl Harbor. All right, there are your other terms. I'll let you focus on that. And there is a trailer attached to the video lesson today about the new movie coming out. On my birthday, actually. Cool. Oppenheimer. So it is about the creation of the atomic weapon. So if you guys get a chance, maybe look into that this summer. That movie's coming out. Highly anticipated movie. And kind of shapes the world what we know it today. All right, there you go. Bless you.
You done? What's up? How about you wait and find out? Really? That's great. Why? Talking about? Oh, we're soon done. Soon. I don't know, maybe 10 more terms. Is that okay with you? Okay, when we get there, I'll ask you, just make sure. All right, anyway, so Manhattan Project. So with this Manhattan Project, what we got? What we got for this term? Alana, what about you, since you wanted to talk about terms so much? What do you got? Hey. What? All right, good job. So in the United States, our goal is to try to create this super weapon, right? And well, it's been in development for a long time at this point. FDR is trying to put a lot of effort, a lot of resources, and a lot of time expenses into creating such a weapon. Right towards the end of the war, yeah, we were taking some of these Nazi scientists to help develop this weapon, but we started this well before even our involvement in World War II. Okay, again, if the Germans got their hands on it, who knows what this world would look like? They would have been using it on Great Britain. They probably would have tried to use it on us. Right? Obviously, the Soviets. Right? Who knows where this would have went? But with the Manhattan Project, there's a lot of development in, especially in the Southwest United States. Okay, especially where the Trinity test occurs in July of 1945, where we're testing this out to see if it works. Again, no one really knew what this thing could do. You got to imagine the intense secrecy of this planning, of this type of weapon. Even Truman, who was the vice president under FDR, he had no idea that this was even going on. So as he becomes president when FDR dies in April of 1945, he's debriefed on it. He's told about this weapon and its progression, and that it's soon complete. He's like, wow, I'm second in command, and I had no idea that this was even a thing. So you can only imagine, right, how important it was to try to keep it in secrecy. All right, so with that, okay, this testing occurs way out in New Mexico, right below Los Alamos, New Mexico. And this is the first test, the Trinity test that occurs. Oppenheimer is one of the key, obviously, developers of this weapon. And there are movies coming out in July, which I think you guys will really enjoy if you check it out. They look forward to it. And again, there's so much on a lot of these scientists' plate now, and a lot of these people that were involved in the project. If it works, great. But what will it do? Will it destroy the Earth's crust? Will it destroy the atmosphere and kill everybody on Earth? Who knows? Oh, geez. What if it didn't go off? Well, maybe some of these scientists would be gathered up and killed. Right? So they kind of knew, and they thought, well, what's the worst thing that could happen? If it works, great, but what kind of damage is it going to cause with all this radiation that leaks out, which many thought about, but really didn't think too much about at the time. And at the same time, it didn't work. A lot of these scientists realized that they might be viewed as maybe some of these sympathizers for the enemy, right? And prolonging these types of projects for an inevitable amount of time until, the Japanese fight back. At the time, who knows, with Germany, right? So there was a lot of pressure on these scientists to develop this weapon and make sure it works. Because if it doesn't, well, their lives will be ended right there. Okay, they'll be viewed as maybe these sympathizers of the enemy or seditious against the United States government. Geez, so there's a lot on these guys' plate here. We all know we do use the weapon, right? We do use the weapon twice to end the war in Japan. So we'll talk about that here a little bit more today. And again, on Friday, you'll read a little bit more about the Manhattan Project and answer a few questions pertaining to it and just some of the decisions made by Harry Truman, the now president of the United States after FDR dies. So one of the toughest decisions ever made, right? You got to imagine using this new super weapon and how it's going to change the world forever. I also did attach a video to the video lesson for today about Oppenheimer, how he talks about the atomic weapon and just really it's really scary. You can see the horror in his eyes when he's talking about it and saying how this is going to change the world forever, and that he's become death, right? And that he's become this new, I can say, this person that brings this new weapon to the world that's going to change things forever. All right, so with that, let's talk a little bit about the end of the war in the Pacific, getting close to it anyway. What was that strategy we were using to try to push Japan back to the mainland? What was that called, Connor? Island hopping. Yep, good job. That's where we left off. So after the Battle of Midway, well, the Japanese Navy was pretty much out of commission, right? They lost 4 aircraft carriers. They lost a bulk of their Navy. And for the United States, this is our opportunity now to continue the push. And that's exactly what we do. We regained the Philippines. Great, right? MacArthur said he'll be back, and he does come back, the Terminator, right? So he takes the Philippines, and we mentioned a little bit about some stories about how when the Philippines was overtaken, it took a lot of time. It's not like the Japanese just gave up and gave it to the United States. Again, they follow that Bushido code to the very end. And this is what's going to push us to and motivate us to maybe even use this super weapon because of how far the Japanese would go. And this thought of surrendering was never in their mind. All right, so we're going to focus here on Iwo Jima and Okinawa. As you can see, it's right below the mainland of Japan, the island of Japan, and how these two island chains here are going to be one of the deciding factors of why we use the atomic weapon. All right, so with Iwo Jima, that's what happens first. So in April 1945, just before the Battle of Berlin, what we're talking about yesterday, a little bit on Tuesday, but as this war was going on in Europe, so was out in the Pacific. And that's why maybe Eisenhower thought, well, maybe we should invade Berlin. So we have this war yet to fight over the Pacific theater against Japan. All right, so with Iwo Jima and Okinawa, as the United States was entering these islands here, as they're invading onto the island, they didn't really see too much kickback. They didn't see too much of a resistance from the Japanese. They actually thought the Japanese just left the islands. They thought, oh, wow, they just pretty much wrecked the air bases that they had here, destroyed it, and left. Okay, so it wasn't like this invasion on Normandy when we were trying to avoid this fire, this constant fire from machine gun nests. It wasn't like that at all. So we get onto the island, but one thing is that the island was pretty much all volcanic ash. So we really couldn't really solidify these areas with armored vehicles, tanks, because there's just no traction here for these types of military armored vehicles. So that kind of left us out of using these types of tanks and armored vehicles on these islands. Eventually, yeah, we brought some bulldozers over to try to really clear out some of the debris, some of the terrain to allow for this type of movement, but it was really hard to get any traction. But again, there really wasn't any type of resistance initially on this invasion. So as our troops are walking internally onto the island, eventually, on Iwo Jima especially, they get to Mount Suribachi, which was a huge mountain that kind of overlooked the whole island itself on Iwo Jima. So the mountain was heavily fortified. There were bunkers, tunnels, all done throughout the mountain. Okay, and this was really tough for the U.S. to try to really evacuate and push a lot of these troops out of Mount Suribachi. You got to imagine they're hunkered down. They created this vast tunnel system within the mountain, and it was really hard to get these Japanese troops out. Even before we made our way up Mount Suribachi, we shelled out with our artillery from our Navy. Maybe even caught some bombing runs by our airplanes, our aerial strikes. So we tried to loosen it up, but again, they're dug in throughout the mountain. It was tough to get ourselves any type of vantage point. Also, the Japanese set up traps all across the mountain. So as our American troops are walking in and trying to successfully capture Mount Suribachi, it was just tough to do. There's a movie out there called Flags of Our Father that really details about this battle itself and just talking about the raising of the flag picture. I'm sure you guys maybe seen that picture before. I know it's kind of small, but that's very symbolic of World War II and just how we are liberating a lot of these areas throughout Southeast Asia, Pacific. Obviously, the war in Europe is already pretty much coming to a close at this point. So this is symbolizing the Allied victory. All right, so with the United States, eventually we do take Iwo Jima, but it comes to a lot of casualties, a lot of deaths, okay, for the United States. Heavy losses. On the Japanese side, there is no prisoners of war. Again, they fight to the bitter, bitter end. So it just symbolizes again how hard it will be if we try to invade the mainland. If we lose, as estimated, 2 to 3 million soldiers just trying to overtake the mainland itself, and that comes from what harsh fighting was occurring at Iwo Jima and Okinawa. So yeah, that famous picture, raising the flag. You guys ever go to Knoebels? Yeah, there's a statue right outside of the bumper cars, the arcade, that kind of shows remembrance to that, which is pretty cool to see. But that image, I'm sure you guys seen that before. All right, with Okinawa, very similar type of battle. And as we get onto the beaches of Okinawa, again, there's a lot of volcanic ash there. It was really hard to gain any type of traction. But again, no resistance. Again, so there we are walking on the beaches. We're like, oh, they just left it. They deserted the island. They deserted this place. The air bases here were all pretty much ripped apart. Okay, but as we made it internally in Okinawa, we saw a lot of fierce fighting. So much so that this was kind of the peak, right? When it came to this brutality, this bloodshed that you see in the Japanese theater, the Pacific Theater War. So it was a difficult overtaking. So I'm sure you guys heard of the movie Hacksaw Ridge, right? So that movie takes place Hacksaw Ridge at Okinawa, and the brutal fighting will just ensue even more. Again, the Japanese, there are zero POWs, prisoners of war, symbolizing again that they're going to fight to the very end. So our numbers, we face a lot of losses, a lot of casualties in these two battles. And again, this is kind of a prelude to what maybe this invasion of Japan would look like. We tried to invade the mainland of Japan. Yeah, we estimated that there'd be 2 to 3 million U.S. soldiers that would die. Yeah, I remember my pop kind of talking about it when I was really young, saying that he was ready for the invasion. And he was getting shipped over. He was at Hawaii, and you got to imagine maybe he wouldn't have made it back. A lot of us here probably wouldn't be here if we would have invaded the mainland of Japan. Which there's an operation for it. Okay, we were ready to invade, which was called Operation Downfall. All right, so there's many other different types of operations in that, but again, it just kind of opens your eyes to what maybe this world will look like if we invade it, rather than using the atomic weapons. Okay, so tomorrow, like I said, we'll read through a little bit of these ideas and decisions that need to be made when dropping the atomic bombs. But again, with the estimates, okay, with the Japanese side, they believe that if we would have invaded Japan, it would have been 8 to 10 million Japanese civilians, soldiers, obviously, all combined, okay, that would die in this invasion and fighting to the very, very bitter end. So tools within 10, 12 billion, well, using atomic weapons that killed several thousand, maybe that was the better solution, which again, there's really no easy pick here, no easy decision. So the Manhattan Project, again, you'll read more about it tomorrow, but with the development of it, FDR put a lot of resources and expenses into creating this super weapon. A lot of it did come from some of the Nazi scientists that we captured, that we took from Germany. A lot of them just surrendered to the Allied powers because, well, they went to the Soviet Union. Chances are they would extract whatever knowledge they had and kill them, right? So with the Manhattan Project, we tried to do it in secrecy. Well, we actually found out the Soviets were spying on this project, which later would help them develop an atomic weapon of their own, but that won't come until 1949. So about 4 years, close to 5 years after World War II ends, after we already have our atomic weapon. So with this atomic weapon, okay, we're utilizing this again as kind of leverage, which we'll mention more when we get to the Cold War. And the last meeting, the last conference, which I forgot to put as a vocab term, we'll talk about that more on Monday, between the big three. So with Truman, he's now the president of the United States. He meets with Churchill, he meets with Stalin, okay? And, well, he kind of throws this in Stalin's face, saying, hey, we have a super weapon. Stalin didn't believe him at first. Well, then we dropped it on Japan, right? Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and ends the war. So for Stalin, he knows that we're not bluffing anymore. So when it comes to negotiations, well, the Soviet Union better listen to us, or who knows, might use this weapon on them. That's something to know. But the first test happened out in New Mexico. Okay, this is called the Trinity test. Okay, with Oppenheimer. Again, I talked about the severity of the situation. Who knows what this bomb will do? Will it destroy the atmosphere? Will it destroy every person on Earth? Who knows? Or if it's a dud, well, all these scientists, all these people involved with this project would probably be rounded up and killed. So again, there's a lot on the plate here for a lot of these scientists. All right, so then we do drop the bomb, right? So in August 1945, we drop bomb on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Anyway, so when you look at the numbers, so 60,000, 35,000 just with one bomb alone, okay, you imagine, oh, that's a huge, huge number. Obviously it is. It's just crazy, the power of this type of weapon. But again, when I was talking about that invasion, with the estimates of close to 12 million people, And that's not even really a drop in the bucket if you think about it. So on Monday, we'll focus more about some of the devastation of the weapon and how some of the Japanese, obviously, when it came to this weapon, what they tried to do to seek refuge from it. Okay, at first, they didn't realize it, they didn't think it was even coming. And then when it hit, well, there's many stories out there that are hard to really handle, makes it really uncomfortable listening about some of these stories with the Japanese, how, the water, the rivers that were surrounding some of the cities here, like Hiroshima and Nagasaki, right, was boiling because of how intense the heat was from these weapons. And just try to escape from the severe burns on their body, they would jump in the river to try to cool off. But as they did, well, the river was radioactive. The river was boiling at this point because of this intense weapon. And when they walked out, their skin literally peeled right off their bodies. It was brutal, devastating, some of these stories to hear about. But again, using these atomic weapons, maybe it was the right choice. Again, there's a lot of debate about it, whether or not we should use it. Maybe we should have, maybe we shouldn't have. But with the estimates, with the tolls, right, the death tolls, invading the island would have been much, much higher of a death toll. So yeah, severe burns, radiation that would linger on and last for really ever for these people. Okay, how brutal this bomb really was, leveling cities with just one explosion. You guys know the first president that visited Hiroshima? U.S. president? This is kind of shocking if you ask me. President Obama. Geez. Okay, so obviously he served as president not too long ago. He's the first U.S. president to visit Japan and kind of pay respects towards the Japanese with this, obviously, this use of an atomic weapon. So for the longest time, we just kind of evaded from it, but President Obama just visited that obviously not long ago in 2012, I believe it was. So when it came to showing your respects, well, he was the first president to do so. You think we would have done so maybe shortly after, maybe the radiation that was still there, who knows? But Hiroshima, Nagasaki, just as one of those expressions, signs that, well, we are this superpower. And when it comes to the Soviet Union, we're going to hold all the cards for a little bit until 1949. And then this arms race will take off. But I thought that was interesting, though, that he was the first U.S. president to visit Hiroshima. Japan is now an ally today, right? A large ally, a strong ally, especially when it comes to the Asian, the Asian theater here in this part of the world. As China's growing, well, we rely heavily on Japan. Our alliance is with Japan and South Korea. So it's one of those things where we really hold on to this alliance pretty strong. Okay, all right. Is there any questions? Manhattan Project, the Battle of Okinawa and Iwo Jima. Why the intense fighting there led us to maybe use this weapon on Japan to end the war. All right.